Marty's Aces Wrestlers here, and today I'm giving you guys part 2 to What If I Were the Flash Season 8. I know it's been a while, but with the recent news that Season 9 is the final season, I decided to finish this up. Basically, what we're going to do in this one is we're going to be going from episode 10 to episode 20. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't season 8 and episode 20, yeah, but this version is 30 episodes. So yeah, and I'm also gonna put a trigger warning. This is the part where it gets a little bit crazier, more disturbing in certain scenes parts. So I'm just gonna put out there, kind of like be warned for like domestic violence, things you should say to people with mental health problems and all that kind of stuff. You know, trigger warning out there. So let's start it. So episode 10, and I said in the previous part that I think around this part Barry starts acting more like P. Anderson, and he starts abusing Iris a lot. And I think the thing is the first and and this story is just from episode 10 to 12. So Barry starts doing it in episode 10, then in episode 11, some people start suspecting it, Cecile starts suspecting it because, Cecile is feeling emotions from Myra, saying that she's scared of Barry, and she has a lot of unexplained stuff. Like, she said that, she had work to do, yet she wasn't even at work, so it's like stuff like that. And over time, it's kind of become prone to a point Iris actually admits to Team Flash that Barry is abusing her. Before, in episode 12, Joe was able to essentially separate Barry and Iris. Now, you could say that because of episode 12, Barry was just going insane, but even then, Barry realized, wait a minute, I'm doing exactly what Pete did. And yeah, I don't think he wants to be anywhere with Team Flash for a bit until, they can finally accept, hey, he realized he was wrong. So I think this is a case of Barry realizing what he did was wrong. Whereas in Pete's case, he didn't see what he did was wrong. So because of that, I think that's some really interesting storytelling. Now, episode 13. This is when Barry gets more hooked up with Jesse. Jesse, I said in the previous part, was a character introduced in episode 5, the Christmas party episode. And I said that in that part, we learned that they were ex-lovers, or they were in a relationship at one point. But because of, and I think me using Barry's mother's death as a perfect example of how some people did not believe Barry, I felt like that could have been the best way for some people to realize, hey, wait a minute, I like this part of the season because it's really showing, hey, some people did not believe him until after years. And I think in this episode, Jesse asked Barry to forgive her for the horrible things she did when they were at one point. And keep in mind, they dated in like high school age, so there's that. They never dated in the comics because Jesse's not even from DC, but yeah. So yeah, eventually Barry does accept and forgive her because she was misunderstood, or she didn't understand the problem. But yeah, and that's when Barry starts to like kiss Jesse, and that's when they just feel like So that was the end of episode 13. More development for Jesse's character. Yeah. Now, in episode 14, we learn more about what really happened the night Nora Allen died. And we actually learn that the context Eobard Dawn gave us in season 1 was literally lies. He didn't came to the feud to 2000 just to kill Barry as a child. He was threatened by a guy who wanted the Flash to be around around 2014 era. Because of that, Dawn had no choice. So now you could be saying, well, yeah, I made a video discussing my theory. And this guy turns out to be the main villain, the real main, I guess the kind of big bad. But even then, I still consider Pete Negan to be also big bad, so there's that. Yeah. However, in episode 14, we also get the introduction to Frank Castle and Johnny Blaze. Frank Castle, or the Punisher, is a war veteran who turned vigilante after being inspired by the Hood from Arrow season 1. You know, the Hood when Oliver was going around killing people. Inspired by him, not Arrow or not the Green Arrow, just the Hood. And Johnny Blaze was one of Barry Allen's friends during high school, during the time he was dating Jesse, who eventually went insane and, sold soul to the devil, or made a deal to the devil, I think, which turns him into, the Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider in this season is kind of played by a few different names, but they're just like aliases. He's known as the Red Death at a few points. He's even sometimes known as the Black Flame, like I said earlier in one of my earlier videos, one of my earlier Flash and Nate videos, where I kind of predicted that Ghost Rider was going to be like the Black Flame. Turns out he was the closest one to Black Flame, so I was correct the entire time. And yeah. Now, this is what I think. Now let's get into episode 15. Episode 15, this is where I think kind of triggers would happen a lot. So, Barry at one point gets, I think in episode 15, yeah, so basically what happened was that, Barry's just doing a normal, ordinary guy. He has no job. He can't get into a job now, given what Thomas just said. But Barry gets into a fight with P. Anderson again. This is when P kind of finds out that Barry has been protecting Jesse, and this is where I think P just starts becoming obsessed with beating, or killing Barry. Barry at one point even tells Pete, hey, what you are doing was wrong. Hey, I did the same thing, and I realized, hey, what I'm doing is completely wrong. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that causes Pete to just lose it even more. And he grabs a knife like he does in the Walking Dead comics. As in the Walking Dead comics, he plans to kill Rick at the funeral, where Pete, because of being so triggered at this point, grabs a knife, tries to kill Barry. Yeah. Keep in mind, this area would the fight that the two fight would be near Washington D.C. It's more like those Halloween thing, where the bus stops. When you always have those places stop there, or just to get to another way. Yeah, they're fighting closer in that kind of area. Yeah. But yeah, eventually the President of the United States sees the two and tries to hold back the two men with security guards and police officers. And this is where I think the most disturbing scene of the entire show happens, and also trigger warning as well. So basically, the President of the United States literally tells Barry that nobody cares about his mental health. And because of that, it drives Barry crazy, and he just begins eating the United States President in front of people. Take a few minutes to take that David. Yeah, so he eats the president of the United States in front of people. Now, Barry's not a zombie. Obviously, he's not a cannibal, but he eats the United States president in front of like a lot of people. And it's innocent citizens, civilians, firefighters, or some of them, doctors, Pete, and obviously police and security guards. It's a lot of people. And this is when he starts like having that psychotic laugh, so much so to the point that you kind of question, man, what is happening with Barry now? This is just all out madness. Yeah, you could say that this scene is way too disturbing, to be honest. It would be way too controversial, but I mean, it's a good scene at least. Yep. So having episode 15 out of the way, let's get into episode 16. Thomas Richards escapes prison, and he causes havoc for Barry, and Barry starts going even more insane and more depressed. Yeah. Because now Barry realizes his sort of girlfriend, Jessie, could possibly now be in danger. And it's not even Reverse Flash or Zoom, it's not Thomas Richards. One of Barry's worst enemies by far. Yeah. And Barry struggles to find Jessie or any women to kind of protect them, make sure they're like in, some facility where, hey, look, no one, Thomas Richards is by far never going to get there or succeed at all. And it drives Barry even more insane. And yeah, and obviously, like I said in part one, because Thomas Richards decapitates people or women. Because of that, it drives Barry completely insane. So I think because of that, I think Barry doesn't know what to do when it comes to this kind of scenario. But in the meantime, Barry has been able to find Jessie. It would protect her. It would protect a lot of women in Central City from Thomas Richards. But yeah. Episode 17. Basically, in this episode, Barry has encountered with Punisher and Ghost Rider. Punisher's Barry's kind of Punisher reminds Barry a lot of Oliver Queen, at least early Oliver Queen. When he was killing people, like I said before. And then, it's just guns instead of arrows, and I want to say him. And in this case, Oliver has to call him John Diggle. And this is when he's stood on FaceTime or sends him pictures of the body about, hey man, I was wondering about this because there's been a new vigilante in town, but I was wondering this. So I know when Oliver was the Hood, did he ever show stuff like that? Like getting people with holes, just obviously arrows. And Diggle says, yeah, he showed a lot of that. Make it very more stressing. Please tell me this isn't a guy trying to ruin the legacy of Oliver Queen. Turns out Punisher think it was more inspired by the Hood and not Oliver Queen. And because of that, I think the work it could do makes better sense. The idea makes much better sense if you get it. I also have to deal with Punisher for a while. Barry struggles against him a lot because, Barry's stressed out by so many different things. Thomas Richards, P. Anderson at this point. He's just struggling with so many different emotions to a point that even he can't at least realize I need a break. I really do, but then again, this is my life now. The United States declaring war with me, Soviet Union still around, China, Scotland, Africa, all those stuff, which they hate me a lot. I need to kind of deal with it. that makes sense to a certain degree. It's relatable and it's understandable. Yeah. Now this is when Barry starts to deal more with Negan a lot as well. Barry starts to become more into Team Flash. Team Flash still doesn't trust him, but they're able to accept that he can at least help in certain situations. However, when Negan starts to become way more stressful for Team Flash, Barry has to talk to him a lot. And yeah, and it turns out Barry are even more stressed out because, has to deal with a lot of stuff now. He has to deal with Punisher, he has to deal with Ghost Rider, he has to deal with Thomas Richards, he has to deal with P. Anderson, now he has to deal with the League of the Saviors now. It's a lot of stress for Barry. Over time, though, Barry starts to stand up for himself against Negan. In the second encounter Negan has in this episode, Barry starts standing up to Negan more, saying, "Hey, we're gonna fight, and if you mess with Team Flash or anyone else, you're going to fight." And in my opinion, it makes sense because Barry's that kind of character. Just for the first half, he was a bit scared. He was only scared for a few episodes, and also by all in all, had to deal with a lot of stress. But over time, he starts realizing it's probably better if we just stand up for ourselves. Is this episode 18? I don't know at this point. I'm gonna go with episode 18, 19, 20, that's it. So, episode 18. Now, because Barry in the previous episode starts standing up more for himself, obviously that's not good in Negan's books, yeah, it's not good in his books or his rules, and he tries to kill someone before Barry grabs the cold gun and shoots the knee with it. Obviously it didn't kill him, it didn't, it just froze him a bit and it hurt a lot. But I think it showed Negan that Barry's not a guy you don't want to mess around with. This guy would do anything to protect people. That's just who he is. Sure, he was a dick for a few episodes, but he changed, he realized he was wrong, and he was able to protect his family. I think that's when Negan realized, man, Barry's someone I shouldn't mess with. This guy is a metahuman. He is a speedster. He's the Flash. Why did I choose to mess with this guy in the first place? That's when Negan starts to be more afraid of Barry, and over time, the Saviors don't show up that often. They're just now a gang in Central City. Yeah. But this is also when Barry starts allowing Jesse to come more into Star Labs as for better protection. Barry reveals to Jesse that he is the Flash because he feels like it should be necessary. Yep. Again, Barry's still dealing with Punisher and Ghost Rider half the time. He is also dealing with Thomas Richards a lot. And same with P. Anderson, still dealing with all four. But he's starting to think, what if all four of them have a connection? He tries to ask him Jesse if Pete has ever met Thomas Richards or Frank Castle at one point, or even Johnny Blaze, but realistically, Jesse should be the most familiar with Johnny Blaze. Because Johnny was Barry's best friend in high school, and was his friend and was the guy Barry needed to talk to when he had problems with Jesse half the time. So there's that. So, episode 19, we're almost done here. After Jesse and Ron find out Barry Allen's the Flash, Jessie realizes Barry is the best protection for her son. Um, Barry does his best to protect Jessie as much as he could, because now she's part of his family as well. Um, Barry's also, with Barry being with a lot of stress, starts knowing that maybe it's better. The more stress I get, the more I can use it against Frank Castle. I can tell him about how what he's doing is wrong. What Frank Castle is doing is just inspiring more evil. He thinks he sort of can do that kind of stuff. But it turns out, and when he tries doing those things against Frank, it didn't work. He tries convincing Johnny the same way, it didn't work. And Barry's also trying to realize, why does Frank Castle and why does Punisher and Ghost Rider hate me so much? This was when Barry tries to look more at his pictures when he had with Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze, and he realizes something. Johnny never looked, and he realized that Johnny at times just didn't like Barry. This is when Barry starts going through Johnny Blaze's childhood, and it turns out he was an orphan like Barry. And Blaze was often jealous of Barry and Jessie's relationship, even though it wasn't a good relationship. But I also think Blaze also hates Barry for a lot of things. Because he starts remembering stuff that he did to Blaze on accident. Some of the stuff he indirectly caused and caused an accident. Because of his mother's murder, it also inspired mentally unstable people to come in and lockdowns and school lockdowns, all that stuff. Because of that, Blaze felt more emotionally upset with Barry. And Barry starts realizing, man, Blaze was really unstable even when we were friends, and I didn't notice it. So I think the theme of this version of Season 8 is sanity, which in my eyes is a much better theme than the one they went for. Because sanity is a much more interesting storyline for characters because, for instance, like in this mini versions, you see Barry as a good person. But in this one, he slowly, or quickly I should say, starts losing it and sees how it affects other people. Punisher lost his sanity. Ghost Rider lost his sanity with Barry. Pete lost his sanity with Barry. Thomas Richards lost his sanity. So you understand the pattern. It basically loss of sanity. United States declaring war. Barry starts losing his sanity. You get the point. But yeah. Barry's also looking more into Frank Castle and why he doesn't like the Flash. And turns out, Barry finds out that Frank Castle was a Vietnam War veteran who lost his family. So basically, that's what caused him to go this path of revenge against the Flash, because the United States declaring war on the Flash means that the Flash is responsible for the Vietnam War, and this drives Barry goes even deeper into insanity because now he realizes I need to deal with these people, and I don't have Batwoman, I don't have Black Lightning to help me, I don't have Superman to help me, I don't have Green Arrow to help me. I need to do this just by myself. And that's when everything goes head to head in episode 20. Basically, in this episode, Pete, because of Pete's obsession with Barry, tries to take Jesse away, take Jesse and run with him. Obviously, and it actually works in this case because He's also a surgeon, you gotta remember that. Barry tries to tell Pete that he can change. If he just takes therapy lessons, Barry can get him the help he needs. That's when Pete just straight up says this stuff like, "You're not human." This is kind of a reference to how mutants are kind of treated in the X-Men comics, where because of they don't really treat them like, because they're not humans technically. Some people don't consider them people. So that's what he's saying here, because Barry's a metahuman, Pete's treating it as if he's not human, which technically Barry is still human because he cares about people. Pete doesn't, so. And that's when Barry decides, I'm just gonna punch this guy in the face and puts him in jail, but also says this guy needs a lot of mental help. Trying to get him through a mental asylum, essentially, to one of the most secure mental asylums in Central City or in the world. This guy needs a lot of help, and does the same with Thomas Richards. Puts him in the mental asylum a lot. Now next would be Punisher. Now Punisher, Barry tries saying that he wasn't even born during the Vietnam War. Yeah, he wasn't. He was born more in the 1980s, 1990s. But he also has to say, just because the United States declares war with me does not mean I caused the Vietnam War. It doesn't. You could think about how I caused the Vietnam War. It doesn't matter. I didn't cause it. And that's when Frank starts going crazy and crazier, to a point that he actually tries to take Barry's life. But that's when Barry was able to put a knife through Frank Castle's gun, and realizing Barry is actually a genius when it comes to guns as well. And because of that, Barry was able to save his own life. And Barry was also able to put Frank in a mental asylum, the same asylum he put Thomas Richards and Pete Anderson in. Ghost Rider was the same case, though Ghost Rider was a lot tougher because, unlike Punisher, Thomas Richards, or Pete Anderson, he had powers. Barry grabbed as many cold guns as he could, tries firing at Ghost Rider, doesn't work. Barry tries to use water against him, it doesn't work. But eventually, Barry realized the best way was to take my sin and put it against him. But then Barry realized, how would he do something like that? But that's when Barry realized his chain. What if I grab his chain? What if I wrap it around Ghost Rider and I show him that he's more full of sin than Barry? And obviously it worked for Barry, it's a case of Barry coming up with a plan by himself. And this is just by himself. This isn't with Team Flash, so at least some people would say, hey, Barry at least comes up with plans by himself, and he does it for a much better reason than say in Season 7 where, Barry has to consistently be told what to do, like half the time. Yeah. And that is it. And after Barry puts Ghost Rider in the mental asylum, the same way he put Thomas Richards, Pete Anderson, and Punisher in, that is when we conclude with Part 3. Part 3, we're going to continue this. But let me know what you thought. This for Part 2. Let me know in the comments. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.